Welcome! I'm Johan Nilsson.
And I'm Lincoln Murphy, and this is Impact Weekly. We're here to help you make your customers successful. Each week, we answer your most pressing customer success management questions by relying on our years of experience with companies around the world.
Let's get this going. Welcome back. It's another Impact Weekly. We have a new question. This person is coming from a different angle than I think we get most of questions. So here it goes. What's the best approach when collecting the feedback from sales and the CSM team? How do you find the balance between listening to clients and sticking to your roadmap?
Interesting. So this is this is like coming from product. Somebody in the product team.
Yeah. But of course, I think it's very relevant for customer success as we are, I think we're in the middle of everything. So, yeah.
I think I'm definitely going to let you take most of this because that's definitely more in your wheelhouse. But I think obviously we can talk about how customer success can provide better feedback.
Right.
So that
very
it's
relevant.
Not just about how to collect it from them. Yeah. Okay.
Mm. I think it's something people talk a lot about, but it's not something you spend time thinking about and evaluating. So I think we can dig a little bit deeper in this one. And I would say also the question is actually two parts, right? So what's the best approach when collecting feedback from sales and CSM? And the second part is how much should you listen to clients versus sticking to your own roadmap plan?
I think the second question there, to me, is the most interesting one. I think practically speaking, we need to talk about how to collect the feedback and pass it off. But I think just at a high level, big picture here, how do you find the balance between listening to your customers and sticking to your roadmap plans?
And I think we do that in a very, I can share a little bit how we do that in a very practical way. I'd also want to mention that we interpret the question here not to be about bugs or issues in the product, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's a quite important distinction to make because that's highly important that you escalate that immediately. And I would say most cases, that type of feedback is something you probably want to act on immediately and prioritize immediately and so on.
Right. Sure. Talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. No, but I think if you haven't been working in a product company, in a SaaS company, building a product, I think maybe you will suspect that a lot of the feedback from customers is going to be what you build. I think it's partially true, but I think also in many cases, since you have to move fast and you have to know where you're going, you need to touch base sometimes with customers to see that you're on the right track. But I would say a lot of times it's the vision for the product, the people behind it, they basically do a lot of the work when it comes to setting out the roadmap. But you can go wrong here, and I think the word balance here is the strong one, or the one to go for.
Interesting, because you have this vision, you have your product roadmap based on that vision.
Yeah,
it's possible to get to learn something new, though, whether that's from feedback, whether that's just some other input, where you have to then re-examine your product roadmap, or you have to, or not the whole thing. You have to look at what's coming up and figure out, is this the right thing? So talk to us more about sort of the process. So how do you take that vision? And I know we could talk about this probably for hours, and there's a lot of detail here, but just at a high level, how do you take that vision and create something that you believe your customer will benefit from?
I think, first of all, I think a lot of the best products out there are built by someone that wants that product for themselves, because I think that makes a lot of things, and there's millions of small decisions to be made when you build a product. And if there's something you really want yourself and you've been longing for, or you've been missing really, and you felt the pain and you've been struggling, it helps you a lot when you take all these decisions. So I think that goes for a lot of products, not even software, of course, but also other type of product, consumer products, and so on. A lot of the best products have been built by people who really were building for themselves, but of course, it resonates with with a lot of other people.
So, so just said there about that resonating with other people. This is where you get into, we've talked about this from time to time on this pod, certainly with something we talk about in customer success management is making sure that we're working with, working with ideal customers, right? Customers that fit our ideal customer profile. These are the customers that are going to thrive as our customers. How does that translate into creating the product and the roadmap, and even maybe figuring into the feedback that's coming from customers?
No, but I think that's crucial here, especially when you get feedback. You need to filter that, and you need to have a lens on there on the feedback. And I think you need to be very clear on your ideal customer profile. I would say even your maybe ideal user, because where this feedback is coming from will make it more or less relevant depending on if it's an ideal user or an ideal customer giving you the feedback, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very important part of this puzzle is to have a clear, your vision needs to be on a specific type of customer, type of user that you want for your product. And of course, if you get feedback from that type of, if you get feedback from an ideal customer, then it can be really relevant, of course.
So let's say in customer success, a customer is giving us some feedback and we're thinking about whether or not we should pass that along, or if we pass it along, we need to include some context for product to look at this feedback through the right lens, as you said.
Yeah.
We might need to pass along some context about whether or not this customer conforms to our ICP, or whether this is a customer that is a good fit, but is not necessarily our ideal customer.
Right. No, I think when you look in that inbox of feedback, you probably need to, as head of product or as the founder or whoever is validating or checking in on those things, you will sort them in relevant, less relevant, basically feedback. And I think ideal customer profile or ideal user, I've seen users giving feedback that maybe were not very relevant. I had some user back some years now that wanted like us to more or less copy the Microsoft XP operational software, so in the UI, but that was not our vision. You have to be careful of basically who's giving the feedback. That's the main point, I think.
No, and this is interesting also at that level when you're looking at the feedback. Are you, and I guess as a CSM, sort of taking the feedback from the customer, but also in validating it or figuring out if this is something to pass along, we also have to have some additional context there, which is why does this matter?
Yeah.
Why do they want this? Is it something, so to your point, they were familiar perhaps with a UI and they want that in this product. That's something, but that's not, like you said, that's not part of our vision. That's not really going to determine whether or not this is successful. Perhaps to your point also, this was not an ideal user. They just had this one, this was just what they would have liked. But how do you, so going back to the balance there, do you think, is there a place in trying to find that balance? Is there a place for additional context? Like when we do goal discovery in customer success, when we're trying to figure out what the objective and the time frame is for our customers, we also ideally want to know the why behind the goal. I think that there's maybe something to that here. Like, why do you want this feature?
Definitely. I think that's a great point to make. When you get feedback as a CSM, or if you're in sales as well, of course, dig a little bit deeper, ask a few follow-up questions so you understand why. So it's not just that they had that in a previous product and they like that. It's more so we relate it to their use case and what they're trying to achieve and do in the product. I think that's a great point.
I know sometimes, like in sales, they might get feedback from a potential customer who says, you don't have this feature, so we're going to pass for now. And maybe it's an unsophisticated salesperson or somebody without a lot of experience will take that at face value and pass that along. Hey, this customer didn't buy from us because we're missing this feature. When perhaps that was simply an objection, maybe a red herring to take the pressure off the customer, gave them an out, but it wasn't truly the reason. They didn't want to buy for some other reason. This was something that would make them be able to get out of the sale and also not make the salesperson feel bad because, oh, it's just that your product is missing this feature. How do you look at something like that and say that's valid feedback or that's something we should ignore, at least for now?
Yeah. I would say managing the feedback inbox, if you like, whether it's externally from customers or it's internally from CSMs or sales or marketing or whoever, takes quite a senior person in the company. I would say almost needs to be on the founder level even, or a very senior head of product to actually be able to properly prioritize between the feedback you get. It's one of the hardest things because if you're not super clear on the vision, you're not super clear on the ideal customer profile, if you don't know the context of this feedback, it's easy to misinterpret and lead you wrong. And so I think it's quite a challenge actually to manage this. And as the example from sales there, exactly, maybe it is a critical feature missing, or maybe it's just an excuse either from the customer or the sales rep. And those things can be hard calls to make. So it's not easy.
No, none of this is easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't even have to be talking about it. I think one of the things that we need to do in customer success management where possible is really to identify customers as whether or not they conform to our ICP, at least the current version. Of course, ideal customer profile changes, but it's nice to know which of our customers conform to our current ICP definition and which are just good fit customers. Of course, which customers are bad fit, which we would say they don't have success potential. Right. There is a difference between customers that are our ideal customer and those customers who just have success potential with us. The ideal customers are those that we want to really build the business around. They're the ones that are going to thrive the most from a customer success standpoint. Those are the customers that are going to expand the most. They're going to be our biggest advocates, right? This is like really who we're trying to build the business around. Yes, we have other customers that are going to find success. They're going to be just fine, but they're not our ideal customers.
Exactly.
And so if we're keeping track of that kind of thing, when the feedback comes in, and that's on the customer record, when you're doing that, what you were just talking about there in terms of that analysis and sort of prioritization, having that context around whether or not a customer is an ICP or not I would think, make that analysis a little bit easier. You could literally just take the customers that don't conform to that ideal customer profile and weight them less than those customers that are ICP. And so right there, that sort of helps in that prioritization. Because again, these are who we're trying to build our business around.
Yes.
Interesting.
But otherwise, one thing I like to do to basically back to this balance between sticking to your roadmap and listening to clients, I like to look at a small group of people that are ICP or even IUP, ideal user profiles, and basically go very qualitative on those people and show them some ideas, mock-ups of new features, and just listen to what they propose. This is something we're building. Would you use it? What do you think? Could this help you? I think that's where you get interesting feedback to your roadmap.
Okay, so I find all of this super fascinating. How do you come up with that thing that you just mocked up for them? Like, how did we get there?
Yeah. I think this comes from where you are really into this area, whatever you're building, right? You are deeply involved in that. You're scanning the movements of us. You're having a lot of discussions with customers, with prospects. You as a founder, as a visionary for the product, you probably have an idea where this is going, what people are looking to do, how to do it. And even more so, if you've been there yourself, I think you can really relate and almost see where this is going. And that's how I at least work out this thesis of how the product should look, or this feature should work and look going forward. Because if you just open-ended ask a question to someone, what do you need now? What more can we build? You won't get very far with that type of question.
So really understanding your customer, creating a hypothesis around where you believe the market is going, where we're heading, and then creating something that sort of fits into that, and then putting that in front of them and saying, what do you think about this? Which could unlock what we were talking about before we started recording, this idea of a latent AX, latent appropriate experience, which is something that they could never articulate. They could never really say, I want this. But because you understand what they want and what they need, you've put together this, in this case, just a mock-up to say, this is how we're going to solve for that thing that you didn't even know you needed. And they go, oh, wow. Yes, that's what I'm looking for. The age-old example at this point is Steve Jobs creating the iPhone. If Steve Jobs had asked people what they wanted, nobody probably would have said anything like the iPhone. I think where people tend to look at that example and go, Steve Jobs just created something out of thin air and it was amazing. But I think really what it was, he tried to think about from the customer's perspective what they would really want. Didn't ask them because this isn't the answer he would have gotten. But he came up with something that he thought was going to work for the customer. I think he was right. I think he got that one right.
He did pretty okay with that.
Yeah, it is okay. But I think it's such a well-known example. But I think what people miss is it wasn't just that he had this crazy vision. He really thought about what would the customer actually want. And maybe that's just a distinction that I need to make in my own mind. But I think it's easy to say, here's this thing I could create. And that's different than here's this thing that I think the customer would really want. And so we go back here and say, okay, in creating a software solution for a particular aspect of business, here's this thing I could create that would do something, or I can sit here and think about what would my customer, if I'm starting from scratch, what would my customer want? And so then you have to narrow down, like you were talking about, to an ideal customer profile. Like if I were to say, this is my ideal customer, what could I give them that would help them achieve this big goal for them? Okay. So now I have that vision, create this hypothesis, then you mock it up and you put that in front of them and they say, this is great. And then what do you do from there?
No, but usually when you see, it's exactly like you say there, when people see something, they couldn't come up with them by themselves, but when they see it, they know they want it. And or they don't, right? So you get instant feedback there just by visually showing them a feature or functionality or a way to do things. And if you get the right feedback there, then you know you're on the right track. If you don't get it, then you probably need to change up things or do them differently and then do it again. But I think that's where you check that you're on the right path by proposing something that's the mock-up is more or less. It looks like a ready implemented product level of mockup you want.
Because if it's latent AX, then it's very possible that somebody is still not getting it because it's maybe several steps ahead of where they are. And they just can't really see your vision, even though it's mocked up, it's right in front of them. So I totally get that. But not just hearing what our customers say, but really understanding what our customers are trying to accomplish, knowing our customers better than they know themselves. I think that's what they always attributed to Steve Jobs, or remember the founders of Airbnb have actually using the term latent experience. And we could say the OpenAI people right now, ChatGPT. I don't think anybody could have articulated that they wanted something that would help them write a blog post or plan a trip or whatever, all these different things that ChatGPT can do, but they've unlocked this massive latent AX that nobody really could have said, this is what we want. And at the end of the day, that was just a hypothesis. They didn't know that was going to be what everybody would want, but here we are. And so I think you do have to understand your customers at a level that they don't even know that themselves. And so to your point, if you're not getting the feedback that you think you should be from them, you have to say, no, I believe this hypothesis is accurate or whatever. I think this is what we should do. And at some point you have to just make that bet, right? Because that's what it is. So that's very interesting. I think you said something that was also very interesting, which is speaking to a smaller cohort of people that you trust, at least initially, and trying to get that feedback and being able to tell your story to them. So that, and being able to do that, sort of one-to-one, so you can really convey that story and so they understand it. I certainly don't have as much product experience as you, but when I've been involved with it, one of the things I always said is everything we build should have a very clear customer story attached to it.
Right.
So if you cannot tell me how this helps, the customer doesn't have to agree with that. They don't have to understand that yet, right? That can be the latent AX. But if you can't tell me how this thing on the roadmap is going to help the customer, then we need to reevaluate whether or not it should be on the roadmap. Do you approach things that way?
I agree. I think that's, of course, there's niche, small things, features, and how should the comment editor look like and so on. Of course, you have all levels here. But if you talk a little bit features as in real pieces of the product, I think definitely there should be a clear goal. How will we help our customers with this feature, basically?
I remember having a conversation recently it was actually when I was the expert witness in that civil trial in the United States where I brought expertise in customer success. And I remember having a discussion, we'll call it a discussion, with the defense attorney for the vendor who was acting in customer negative ways. And they just couldn't understand how anything to do with customer success or customer service existed outside of an agent talking to a customer. So their understanding of this was so narrowly focused on a customer service agent. And when I explained that customer success being all encompassing of all, I think, customer facing activities and interactions includes the product. Your product is built in a way that isn't customer positive. If it has dark patterns in it that can trick or deceive the customer, then you are acting in a customer negative way. You're doing things that are not customer success or customer centric. It was an interesting discussion here. I had to educate the defense attorney a little bit on what customer success actually involves. But so it's.
I love that we have a defense attorney in this pod.
Yeah,
that's a counterpart. Yes, highest level.
Yes.
Yep, that's cool.
Okay, so I think in terms of breaking this down into more actionable things, and of course we'll close out with some very specific solutions. But I think just to recap, we need to look at feedback the right way.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
It's very easy as a human person to look at feedback as negative, right? There's a meme I saw that said, I'm sorry, when I'm open to criticism, I meant positive feedback.
Exactly.
Right?
That's spot on.
Yes, exactly. Please be brutally honest with me, but only if it's positive.
Exactly.
I think we can take feedback. Now, of course, there are going to be some customers that are always giving feedback and come across as annoying rather than helpful. But for the most part, when a customer is providing feedback, it means they care or they're invested. They want this to succeed. They want to remain your customer. So they are providing you with things that would help that continue to be the status quo of this relationship. And no, we can't solve for every request that every customer makes, but we can use that as a reason to have a conversation.
Yeah,
We don't get
absolutely.
defensive. We look at it as positive and we dig in and we read between the lines. What are they really asking for? We get into active listening mode. We're approaching this with empathy. We're trying to understand what they're really going for. And a lot of times, and I'm curious on your experience here, but in my experience, just from a customer success management standpoint, when customers are providing feedback and we're making them feel heard, a lot of times we get to a point where we realize that let's say the feature request that they had, that wasn't really the issue.
No, right.
It wasn't really a feature request. They had something else going on. So we were able to solve for whatever that was. And we don't even have a feature request to make the product because that wasn't the issue in the first place. Now the customer feels heard. We've moved past it. We're on to something better.
Yeah.
Have you run into that?
Definitely. It's even sometimes that we actually had that feature, but in a different capacity or in a different way. Or so that's why you have to actually dig deeper when you get some feedback. Yeah, we would like to have this. We would like this automation, or we would like to have this export functionality, or we would like to have this report or whatever. To stop there and pause a little bit and ask for context and ask for why. And because as you say, I've seen that many times as well, that the actual feature request was, we could help them in another way, or we actually could do that in the product, or was something different they were talking. So it's definitely important to stop there when you get that feedback and really understand it and read between lines.
This also goes back to what you were talking about in terms of different user personas and also how the user came to use our product.
Right.
Because what I find is very often where the customer company decided to switch to our product. That doesn't mean the users decided to switch to our product, right? So when we're talking to a user, and it could be, we might not be talking to all of the end users, but we're literally talking to an admin and they didn't choose to use our product and they might be upset that they have to use our product. And that other product that they used to use that they really liked, that they have a certification in, it did it this way.
Oh, yeah.
You guys don't do it this way. What am I supposed to do now? Understanding their context, that this was forced on them.
Right.
That they're upset that they're using this. They're not upset with you. That might be coming across that way. And hopefully that they're not actually being mean to you. They're not being super cooperative or they're whatever, because this was not their decision.
Yeah.
If we understand that, we let them get that out of their system, make them feel heard. Then we can start to say, look, I understand that you want this. There was this blue button in this other product that you used. That blue button did these things. We do those things too. It's just that it's already done automatically behind the scenes, or this is how we do it. And I want to show you the most efficient way because I know that this switch has been hard for you. I know this was not something that was your idea. So I want to make this work for you as efficiently as possible.
Right.
Making them feel heard is such a huge part of just human communication. It's communication, right?
Yes.
There's back and forth.
And we need to remember also when put up a feedback, or they actually, from their point of view, they are reaching out for us. They're a little bit opening up, right? So we need to be extra careful when they do that. And both to listen in and to really understand, but also I think sometimes a very common mistake we do is that we bring that feedback home with us and then you never update the customer again. They don't hear back from you. You basically have an open loop there. They have to ask about, okay, what happened with my request there or my idea there?
Yes. So communication is key. We need to manage expectations with them, let them know that your request is just a request. We're going to put it into the queue and see where we go from there. And then, yes, closing that loop. And even if it's not seen as positive, this feature is not going to be implemented or not going to be implemented this quarter or whatever. You have to close that loop. An open loop with the customer is way worse than getting told that the request they made was not going to happen. because open loops cause people to overthink and catastrophize and basically go down the wrong path.
Exactly.
It's better just to close that loop.
Yes.
Closing the loop also isn't just with the customer, it's also internally, and this is more for product.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, and I hope you are, when the CSM makes a request on behalf of the customer, we need to make sure that we update the CSM on those things as well, because I said this before we went on, customer success, we have two main rivals in our company. One is sales and one is product. And we really shouldn't. There is that us versus them thing going on with sales, and there's another one that's going on with product, because it's just the nature of whatever we do. Although hopefully we have a culture and leaders that try to keep that stuff in check. But we want to make sure that we aren't doing things to further this perception of an us versus them culture. So as feedback flows into product,
right,
additional feedback or what results or whatever, that needs to flow back to CS and probably to sales too, if sales is giving that feedback.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're fostering that environment of us versus them, because I keep giving you feedback and I'm not hearing anything in return.
And the flip side on that is, of course, that we in customer success, sales for that matter as well, we should, of course, not spam product team either with some requests and ideas and improvements and so on, because that's not going to help either, right?
No, so we talk all the time about trying to engage customers and making sure that our messaging is relevant. We often are actively teaching our customers to ignore us. The same thing goes for our internal stakeholders inside the company. If all product ever gets from CS is just a bunch of nonsense requests, at least from their perspective, then they're going to ignore you. Be thoughtful. Don't just send a request for everything. Write it down for yourself. Write it down in a centralized place for the team to validate. And then take the things that are highest priority and send those to product. So do some internal vetting. And I think that's going to make product trust that the feedback they're getting from you is more thoughtful and more valid than if you were just, whenever something comes in on a whim, you just instantly spam them with it.
Perfect. All right. So let's wrap this up with our 3 takeaways for this person asking the question. So I'll start here. So I think we talked about this quite a lot, but I think first of all, it's great when you get feedback, both internally and from the customer. Make sure the customer or the internal person feels heard. They took time, they thought this through, they care, which I think that's awesome, right? So we need to lean in on that.
Totally. But we also need to manage expectations with the customer. So they're giving us that feedback. We need to make sure they understand that we're going to take that in. It's a request. It's just a request. It's going to be vetted and prioritized, and it will be worked in that way, and it may or may not get done. And we just need to be honest about that. Be transparent, be clear, manage expectations.
Perfect. And finally, close the loop, right? So make sure to, as soon as possible, rather the next day or 2 days or whatever, the same week even, update the customer that even if you're not going to do this, or if it's not going to happen anytime soon, let them know, because you need to close that loop. That goes back also to the first point that we really care about the feedback they gave us. Cool. So that's it. Thanks everyone, and see you back next week. Hey, thanks for listening. Do you want to bring your customer success to the next level? Check out Impact Academy. We have training programs for customer success managers and for leaders in customer success.